I hope this is happening in your family. I hope there is forgiveness. I hope there's a chance for you. Maybe you're right now angry at someone. Maybe someone is angry with you over something you said or something you did. And there's quarreling going on in your family. There's bitterness. There's sorrow. Maybe you're weeping like Benjamin and Joseph did. You're weeping together because you realize what you've done to your brother Joseph or your other brother. This story really illustrates the brothers' jealousy and envy. That's at the root of their anger. And today, my question for all of us that deal with anger. How many of you struggle with anger, first of all? Raise your hand. What's that? Let's talk about that today. Not in a condescending or harsh way, because there's a lot of people that can come at us pretty harshly, judgmentally about our anger, about what's in our hearts. And I don't think we're here to judge. We're just here to try to understand how we can help you better understand your anger. One of the things I want to, do you like that? I love that. Don't you love that? I thought that was funny. Address anger before it addresses you. How many of you, there are times where we don't have a plan or we don't see the early warning signs of our anger. And it gets the best of us or the better of us. It can overtake us. Rather than us having control of it, it has control of us. Do you feel that way at times? Your anger gets the best of you? I know for me it does at times. I want to talk about that today. How many of you have driven out around this community in Louisville or Indiana, and you, at times, you're so busy talking on your cell phone, hopefully you're not doing that in driving, or you're talking to your spouse or your kids, and you're telling them, shh, be quiet, I'm trying to drive, I can't hear, and you miss the stop sign, or you all of a sudden, the stop sign comes up, and you're like, you have to brake real fast. Raise your hand if that's happened to you. You've missed the stop sign. You've had to, all of a sudden, you come up to a stop sign. You have to brake real hard because you almost went through that stop sign. That stop sign is a warning sign. It's a red warning sign to say, stop, slow down, and think about your anger. Stop, slow down. Or how about the railroad crossing? We had a railroad crossing in Cherokee, Iowa. We had a railroad crossing, and every time a train came, there was a lot of trains that would come through Cherokee, Iowa. It's a small town. It would never fail. A train would come in early in the morning, sometimes at 5 in the morning, and they'd be blaring that horn, and you'd wake up to that sound. And it was that railroad crossing always was a warning sign to stop and to think about your anger. Because sometimes, at that warning stop or that railroad crossing, you can get so angry. How many of you get so angry at a stoplight? Raise your hand. You're at a stoplight, you're waiting forever, that stoplight won't turn green, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm angry. I get angry. How many of you have that's happened to you before? You get so angry at that stoplight, that anger just squeezes you. And it causes your heart to start racing and your blood pressure gets going. And guess where all that blood pressure goes? Guess where all that blood goes? It's a fight or flight. It goes right to the hand, and that hand starts gripping things, and you start throwing things, and you start getting angry. And we start squeezing. Have you noticed that anger, that tension in your fists, in your hands, in your neck when you get angry? Blood pressure starts up. For many of us, we don't see the early warning signs of our anger before it's too late. We're unaware of the red flashing lights that warn us of the oncoming onslaught of our anger. Or if we're aware of the red flashing lights or the red stop sign and still go through with the flashing red anger, we still sometimes see the warning signs coming and we still don't stop. We go right through the red light. I've seen that a couple days ago. A guy went right through a red light. He's in a hurry. Remember, those railroad crossing lights are to remind us to slow down, breathe and let go of that anger before it squeezes you to death. It is easy at times to fall prey to the fiery furnace of affliction and anger, and we want to strike back at people and things that give rise to our stress and anger. I noticed that there's a tie between stress and anger. If we're not dealing with our stress, it's going to deal with us in angry outbursts and angry ways. This is the lesson of our passage for today. Joseph could easily have fallen victim to the monster of anger, but he didn't. And let us count the ways. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, let us count the ways that he did not fall victim to anger. First, Joseph's brothers plotted his demise. First, they were going to kill him. If that wasn't enough to make him angry, they were going to next throw him in a pit. Finally, they take advantage of a caravan traveling their way and sell Joseph to the traders. Wow, what betrayal, what hurt. He was sold into slavery. Second, he was falsely accused of rape and thereby thrown into jail by Potiphar's wife. Third, Joseph could have easily fallen victim to his anger because he lived during a time of famine and the prospects of surviving were difficult. How many of us live during times of COVID? It makes us angry. Plague, There's a lot of angry people right now in churches, in our communities, in families, on Facebook. I see a lot of angry rants going on Facebook, people becoming political. There's a lot of anger I've noticed in people at work, in their household. I think Joseph wasn't overcome with his anger because he cherished and treasured, write this down, a heart full of forgiveness instead of the fiery furnace of anger. As Leslie Wright writes in her commentary, quote, after all the things the brothers did, many would expect Joseph to hate them, inflict harm on them, or at least cast them aside. However, he doesn't respond this way. He sees their change of heart and shows them forgiveness. He even says, forgive yourselves for what you did to me. In fact, he even tells them not to be angry with themselves for what they done to him and saying that God has sent him to Egypt in order to preserve them. Many of us today are hurting and angry at someone or at the world or at politics or at COVID. We have gone through tough divorces, survived the loss of someone we deeply love, and are angry at our spouses or our children for what they put us through. Anger and grief a lot of times go hand in hand, I've noticed. For Joseph could easily have grieved and been angry at the being sold into slavery and at his own suffering. Today I will present 3 ways we can get out of the fiery oven of anger and affliction and find the pinnacle of a forgiving heart, as Joseph shows us. Let's talk about that. The first way to find a forgiving heart rather than a bitter heart is to admit we are angry. So many of us are in denial of our anger. We walk around bitter and walk around and someone's like, you seem really angry at the world, ticked off at the world, ticked off at your children, ticked off at your husband, ticked off at your wife. What's going on? And you're like, what? I don't see that. What are you talking about? I'm doing great. There's no problems with me. If there's a problem with you. As Mark Merrill says, don't avoid the red warning light of fear. The most important thing is first face the fact that we all struggle with anger. As humans, we naturally react emotionally to distressing situations. This is the first step on our way to having a heart of forgiveness. Like Joseph, it's to admit first that we have an issue. We're angry. We're angry with ourselves, we're angry at others, and we're angry at God. That's the first step on the path to a forgiving heart. It's to admit that we've been betrayed, to admit that we've been let down, to admit that we've been hurt, and admit that we are angry. That's the first step. Let me talk a little bit more about why I think Joseph had a heart of forgiveness. I think Joseph was well aware of the warning signs early on about anger. Let me demonstrate with an example about the early warning signs. Being aware of the early warning signs so that so that your anger doesn't destroy you or destroy someone else. Have you ever, I'm thinking of this comes to mind, okay? This is just coming off the top of my head right now as I think about it. Preheat oven. Have you preheated your oven before you put a pizza in? Yeah. Anger a lot of times is that there's a preheat cycle of anger. You're starting to kind of get warmed up. You're getting flash, like really warm in the face. Your heart starts palpitating real fast, and there you can tell you're starting to get tense in the hands, and your necks are getting tense, and there's a vein bulging out in your forehead, and there's that preheated, I call it the preheat. You're preheating the oven of anger. That's what I call it. Preheating the oven of anger. When you preheat something in the oven, it's the same thing with anger. And you can see how that preheat, when you preheat anger, you're starting to think about that person over and over who hurt you and you're offended by, and you start thinking about that person, getting even with that person. You start preoccupying, thinking about how they've wronged you, and then you start thinking, well, gosh, I can't stop thinking about this person. I can't stop thinking about the words that they said. That's preheating your anger. You're starting to, your breathing starts getting heavier. You're starting to tense up. That's preheating the oven of anger. When you preheat your pizza, same thing. You're preheating. You're warming things up. That's important to find those early warning signs before they take over your life. Okay? Those triggers, I call them. What triggers your anger early on? Joseph noticed what triggered his anger. It was his brother's, jealousy and his brother's envy. He was aware of that. So first admit we have problem with anger. The second way to find a heart of forgiveness like Joseph is to address our anger. Talk about it. So many of us silence our anger and push it down and say, I was taught growing up in the church or in my family that I can't get angry, so I'm going to repress or suppress my anger. And that's not healthy either. Mark Merrill again tells us very insightfully what to do with this step. Next, after admitting our anger, we must find the root of our anger that is lodged deep within us. And this is called addressing our anger and the bitter roots that run deep within us. Common roots of anger include fear, pain, frustration, loss. For instance, some people get angry as a fearful reaction toward uncertainty, to fear of losing a job, or to fear of failure, or to a fear of being emotionally cut off by someone. Others become angry when they are hurt in relationships or cause pain by close friends. And when it comes to me, the root of my anger is a lot of times connected to stress. I've noticed that when I am stressful, I have a stressful day, and that I'm noticing that stress in my life, anger comes out of that stress. I've noticed that. There's such a connection between stress in my life and anger. The third way to find a forgiving heart like Joseph is to take action in figuring out what will help us work through our anger. Merrill points out the third step to releasing anger in our lives, and that is to figure out how to deal with it in a healthier way. Quote, only when confession and forgiveness are present will you be able to let go of your anger. Gary Oliver says it this way. He's a Christian counselor, psychologist. One of the many potentially positive aspects of anger is that it can serve as a very powerful and effective warning system. Healthy anger can help us identify problems and needs and provide us with the energy to do something about them. They're catalysts, they're motivators to get healthy, to seek help. Dr. Oliver has mentioned the negative ways to deal with anger, and that is, quote, by ignoring or burying our emotions, which will express itself physically, psychologically, emotionally, and guess what? Spiritually. By addressing our anger as it comes, we will be able to stop the strong emotion from building up and taking over our lives. Whenever we ignore or bury our anger, it is buried alive and creates a health risk for ourselves. Finally, we're back to Joseph, the main character in the story, and one person who shows us how to have a forgiving heart rather than an angry heart. Joseph realized something which only God could have revealed to him, and something God offers to us as well. And that it is never too late to forgive. How many of you are still angry with someone 10 years ago? Raise your hand. How many of you are still angry with someone 5 years ago? Raise your hand. How many of you are still angry with someone 2 years ago? Raise your hand. How many of you are still angry with someone a couple days ago, a week ago, a month ago? Raise your hand. Okay. It's never too late to forgive, to present the gift of forgiveness. Joseph, as one commentary mentions, encounters his brother again later in his life, and it is at this God moment that he's truly able to see God at work, especially in his family's life. I love the commentary between Joseph and his brothers in this story. Joseph and his brothers are much older and wiser at this point, and this is what is said. Do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here. Again, Joseph is offering them the grace of forgiving themselves at this moment because it was to save lives that God has sent me ahead of you. It was not you who sent me here, but God. And after this, Joseph reassures his brothers, offering them forgiveness, saying, You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. Joseph and his brothers have been through many ups and downs and difficult hardships and sufferings, yet it wasn't too late for Joseph to offer them forgiveness. And it's not too late, everybody, brothers and sisters in Christ. It's not too late to offer someone that you're mad at forgiveness. That's the greatest gift you could provide someone today and this week. Are you still angry with someone? Are they still angry at you? I love what Leslie Wright says in her interpretation of the Joseph story in his Heart of Forgiveness. Forgiveness is difficult, especially when we've been hurt deeply by those who you love deeply. Joseph loved his family, but jealousy, hate, and envy initially got in the way of his brothers. Even though all of that he went through, he still forgave them. We all struggle with forgiveness at some point in our life. We all struggle with anger at some point in our life. And maybe that point of your life is now. But holding on to anger, resentment, thoughts of revenge only cause you more suffering and heartache. It doesn't cost the other person, it costs you hours of sleep, health problems, health risks, blood pressure problems. When we do this, we become both the prisoner and the jailer if we don't forgive. If we don't forgive, let me say that again, we become the jailer and the prisoner. So forgiveness helps us move on without anger, contempt, or to seek revenge. Here's the challenge. Today, I want you to do this. When you are at that red stop sign this week, or at that railroad crossing, and that light's going like this, flashing, or you're at a red light, I want you to do this. You're going to be on the steering wheel. Your hands are going to be on the steering wheel, and they're going to grip the steering wheel, and you're going to be like, I want to go through that red light. I'm so impatient. I want to go. I want you to release those hands. Release that anger. Release those hands and say, God, I'm offering you my hands. I'm offering you my anger, and I'm asking you to please help me with forgiveness. Forgive that person who just budged in front of me at the Kroger. Forgive that person who just is driving me nuts. Instead of holding on like this, with anger, I want you to release that anger and give it away. And I want you to be like this. Can you all do this? Go like this. Grip, go like this, and then release. Release that tension. Release that tension. That is forgiveness in an image. If I had an image to give you of forgiveness, moving from anger to forgiveness, it's this. I'm offering to God my anger, and this is forgiveness. Surrendering, letting go of getting even. Let us pray.